Good morning, everyone, and welcome to not a Hangouts and Headlines. It's a little bit later in the day for that, but instead to our Question Time stream. Now, if you aren't familiar with Question Time is a video series monthly done through support from community members like you. If you're watching this right now live in our chat, or if you're not watching live in our chat, it still might be done by supporters like you because we get support from our platforms like Utreon and Patreon in order to make all of this stuff, hopefully that you like, but even if you don't, that you sometimes watch on the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. And part of those support platforms have a tier that allows you to specifically ask a question on Question Time. And then we put it up in one of our virtual legality slides, and it looks like we're talking about something that we might talk about on a virtual legality episode or even a Hangouts and Headlines. And we have two such questions today to do here on Question Time. And again, if you want to do that with that format, please consider supporting the channel on those platforms. But otherwise, after we talk through those questions, and they're pretty good ones this week, I think, or this month, then we talk through community questions, anything anybody has here. So the only thing I would say is hold your questions right now if you are in chat until we get to that portion of the show, because I won't be looking for questions before we get through that. And then when we do, flag those for me, either with bold questions, capitalized question at Hoeg Law tends to flag things for me, although it doesn't cross over perfectly to the StreamYard, or of course, Super Chat. Not necessary. You don't have to do that here in this space, but I will see those if they do come across as those colored chats. I think that's why YouTube built them that way. But before we begin, I do want to thank everybody. We just went and did a mail pickup this morning. Co-counsel, I say we, right? She'll tell you I never leave the house and I'm always streaming. She went and got the mail for me from the address for Hoeg Law, and so many people sent so many generous things. I never know exactly what people are willing to put out there in public or to actually have shared with everybody, but I just want to say it is just an amazing thing, an amazing community that we have here that is sending us just ridiculously creative stuff from where they live, stuff from that they've made on their own. And I am just so impressed by everything and everybody. So I wanted to say thank you there. We won't put names down or anything like that. If you do want to be mentioned in like a Question Time or community stream, let me know in a note in those packages, and I will try to make sure I make that happen, because the stuff you guys do is just super, super cool. And I wanted to thank you for it. And I'm sure we'll be putting together other thank you messages directly to the folks that sent us stuff. But I wanted to say that in this context, because honestly, I'm impressed by all of you. And I can't make anything at all. And you think, oh, he's just being self-deprecating. No, you can get co-counsel in the chat here. I can't do things with my hands at all. I can play video games, but I can't make things. That's for Rob at Law and Lumber. That's for Ian at Runkle of the Bailey, who continue to impress me as well behind the scenes. But I can't make those things. I'm super, super impressed by the people that do. And so at bare minimum, Question Time, I think, should be community celebration. You guys rock. You guys are absolutely awesome. So thank you so much for that. Now, let's take some of these community supporter questions from Utreon, from Patreon, and let's see what they have to ask. So the first question, and these were actually really well presented. A lot of times I will cut out the context from the questions, but I think we need them for these kinds of conversations. So I'll read these through. Throughout the years, from what I've read, many court cases have affirmed both the legality and importance of reverse engineering in many fields. This is true, especially concerning software and the idea-expression dichotomy in copyright, as in reversing a copyrightable program to be able to see the uncopyrightable ideas and processes. Yep, this is exactly right. And of course, the question is already referring to the fact that you can't copyright an idea, a concept, a system. And so you can only copyright the execution, the expression of that idea. And oftentimes people get confused by this because, frankly, oftentimes the courts get confused by it. I think actually video game, for instance, jurisprudence or board game jurisprudence about rules and rule sets, probably wrong for the rule that is written into the statute that you can't copyright an idea, a concept, or a system. And so there could be some modifications there. And that's part of this answer that we're going to get to when we get to the question, which is that there's a whole host of intellectual property things that aren't coate. They aren't concrete. They aren't solid because they don't get litigated that much. And so if you're not going to go through the process, the expensive and time-consuming process of litigating them to the end, We have a whole host of areas of law, particularly in intellectual property, that there's kind of amorphous, where if you go into a lawyer's office and you say, hey, could I sue over this? Or is this a problem for me that somebody's claiming this? They'll say, maybe. Depends. Certainly we have to dig into the facts and circumstances of any given case, but even if we do that, we can't predict exactly what a judge will do, what a patent office might do if you challenge them on these various things. And so that's part of this story. Nowadays, continues the question, however, almost all commercial software has an end user license agreement, a EULA, that has a blanket prohibition against reverse engineering in any form. Yeah, generally speaking, it'll be a violation of your license to do that. My question is, considering that many courts have ruled it to be legal on its own and important for innovation in the past, could such clauses be found to be null and void for being against public policy? Which is an excellent question. So this combines a couple of things in the law. So the first is, as I often say in virtual legality, in the United States in particular, which I'm not going to speak to intellectual property in other jurisdictions because they're going to have different rules and different thoughts on all of this. In the United States in particular, most jurisdictions in most ways will try to honor the freedom to contract, which I already know some comments are going to say, well, there's different power structures and nobody reads the boilerplate. And you're right on all this stuff. But for the most part, the U.S. default rule is if you agreed to something, you clicked through it, you signed it, whatever it might be, and it has a term that isn't just beyond the pale, you sold your soul, your firstborn child, something along those lines, then you're going to be bound by the terms of that license. And in end user license agreements, generally speaking, what you will have is a section that says, here are the very bad things that you can't do. So we're licensing you this, let's call it just a software program. We look at video game licenses all the time. We're licensing you this ability to play, I don't know what's in the news, Call of Duty. And that license almost certainly has a section that says, thou shalt not, call each other names online, do very bad things behaviorally, but also from a technical perspective, you won't try to reverse engineer this product. And there's some context here that I did remove from the question, but they refer back to the PlayStation, Bleem, Connectix kind of lawsuit cases that found essentially that you could go in and you could break through some protected materials in order to get to figuring out how something worked so that you could emulate it. And this was also throughout kind of the early days, I guess it's early days, of video game consoles and figuring out what could interoperate with things. You have a whole host of cases along these lines. And the general rule in the United States, and I've done some videos on this that you can check out in this space, is that especially for interoperability, technological operations between things like video game consoles and cartridges, or emulation of those video game console experiences so you could use the disc in a different way. Especially for interoperability, the law is very generous. We want you to be able to reverse engineer for that purpose. But we don't, as a law, want you to just be able to reverse engineer and copy content, trade secrets, things that actually go into that. We don't want you to be able to go and grab the assets for Call of Duty and use them in a different way. So that presents an issue. One, because it's a little bit difficult to tell exactly what you're planning to do with your reverse engineering process until you get into a court of law. And by the time you're in a court of law, and I've talked about this with respect to things like fair use and intellectual property, in some respects, you've already lost, right? At the time that you don't get it kicked out immediately and you're actually in discovery or you're dealing with however long it's going to take to have that legal pursuit, you're going to be unhappy with everything that has happened, regardless of whether you could win at the end of the day. And you still want to win, of course, at the end of the day. But the other aspect of this is this notion presented at the end of this question, which is, can it be void for public policy? Now, that is an equitable consideration. So the power of the courts is divided a little bit into law and equity. Law is what we might think of as reading the black letter, reading the rules and saying this is a violation, this is not. And then above that, the courts have equitable powers. And we talk about that a lot in this space, most primarily with respect to like preliminary injunctions, where with an injunction, the court has total equitable power. They could say, you can change this, you can order something to happen in order to preserve fairness in this context. And the court generally can't be second guessed on that. You can appeal it, of course, but that the courts overall have the authority to just say, in the interest of justice, we're doing this. One of those areas of kind of trained law is this contract is void for public policy. And you can go and you can look at what the legislature has said. You can look at the context of recitals for what the statutes say. If you're the court, you can look at it and say, this is just clearly unjust based on how the state believes about freedoms or liberties or something else, whatever it might be in the context of that contract. So certainly you have situations in end user license agreements where there's arguably stuff that is what we would call unenforceable. And unfortunately, this is kind of a part of drafting contracts like that. There's probably a lot in a lot of contracts. If we were to go through and do an analysis of an end user license agreement, you could probably pluck out in any given jurisdiction a number of things that would at least give pause. It would be difficult to enforce. And the reason that companies put those in there is that a lot of people are good, honest, law-abiding folks that would, at the end of the day, if they had a problem, at least go back to what they agreed to before and say, hey, was this allowed? Was this not allowed? Analyze the contract and take it on face that it's enforceable, that they put it out there, I signed it, I agreed to these terms, and so that's the end of the story for me. My word is oak, that kind of thing. But it isn't always the case. And sometimes companies, and it's not just limited to companies, honestly, it could be a vendor. It could be somebody else on an individual basis. Sometimes those folks take advantage of the fact that there are gray areas. A lot of people are going to be honest. There's a cost to trying to figure out whether something isn't enforceable, and they'll put stuff in that they know maybe isn't the most enforceable thing in the world. And they'll put those into those contracts on the premise that a whole bunch of people are going to kind of abide by that. Even if it were to go into court, you wouldn't have a winning argument. And this is a conversation I have all the time with my clients evaluating contracts. I say, look, they've proposed this thing. It is ridiculous. I don't think it's enforceable against you. However, it would be very difficult to prove that. It would become a problem. Do you want to fight it now? Do you want to just accept it? Again, if you haven't worked with a lawyer before, especially in a commercial context, it's important to remember the client is the boss. And that goes the other way too. I say, hey, look, you're asking me to draft this thing. I can draft it. I don't know that you're going to have any luck in a litigation context. And they say, I know, it's no problem. So, okay, fantastic. Sometimes that requires a memo to my file where I say, I have advised them that this is enforceable because if they try in the future, I don't want to be the guys that, oh, you promised us this would work. I did not. I did not. So that's a conversation point as well. And I think at the end of the day, when you're talking about reverse engineering between, like, let's call it sophisticated corporations or something like that, you might not have as much luck as you would getting something void for public policy as if you were an individual and it was a click-through license and you really don't expect anybody to read them. In some jurisdictions, I tell you that we believe in freedom of contract and things like that. Some jurisdictions are going to be harsher on end-user license agreements, period. Certainly outside the United States, but even certain states in the country are going to look at it and say, nobody reads this. Lawyers, you tell me what this says. Have you read it? When's the last time? Years ago? What is in this? That kind of thing. And so the answer to this is that on an interoperability standard, the stuff that there really is full-on case law, legal precedent, chances are you couldn't enforce a provision in the end-user license agreement against that kind of activity. But you've still got other considerations because the law has passed since we talk about it a lot in a different context here. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act has things about technical circumvention that create an additional layer of problems for what would have been a free pass in reverse engineering. If you have to crack something, that's a different violation of the law than just pure infringement now. And so you've got problems there. There's a whole lot of stuff to work out. I cannot claim that copyright, especially in the tech space, is great. But if you're looking at an end-user license agreement, you're talking about interoperability, and it says you can't reverse engineer, there's a possibility that a court wouldn't enforce that against you. The big problem is it might take a little time to get to that point where you could prove that. And so you have to be willing to kind of take on that legal cost as part of the discussion. A lot of people aren't going to be willing to do that, but it's a great question because you're exactly right. You do have provisions in these contracts that may not be enforceable in certain jurisdictions or contexts. And that's very difficult for anybody to determine either on their own or even with a lawyer. If I were sitting here and you talked to me about what you plan to do to reverse engineer, I'd be like, well, here's the contract situation. Here's what they're going to ask for. They're going to call it a breach. They're going to potentially try to get you on infringement if you breach that license. A whole host of things could happen. And you might be in the right, but it might take a long time and some money to prove. So thank you so much for the question and for supporting the channel. Very, very awesome of you. I really appreciate it. And I love having these conversations, so it's fun for me as well. Thank you so much. And we'll get question 2 right now. And this is a fun one. I don't have a good answer for this one either, so these are fun questions. One area I'd like to see more of is legal issues around emerging AI tech with respect to text, art, or code. So this is AI writing books or AI making pictures and AI doing videos and all sorts of stuff. Text doesn't generate too much to talk about, but AI art gets quite a few creators upset with various levels of legal considerations. Can companies train models without explicit permission or on public data? Is any infringement the fault of the prompter? Is copying a specific artist's style or look infringement? Reasonable minds want to know. We do. We do want to know. And here's one area that we can talk about kind of the problems with the legal process. The law is slow, right? The night is dark and full of terrors. The law is slow, and this is brand new. You might think, well, Rick, we've been looking at AI stuff for at least a few years now. Certainly the stuff that my friend Ian at Runkle of the Bailey puts out there with his stuff where he prompts things and gets out great pictures are awesome. You can take a look at the thumbnail for our Talking Dragons episode we did between episodes of Lawyers and Dragons. That was a prompted AI art construct, which I think is awesome. But here's the deal. No one knows the answers to these questions. Really specifically, they don't. So we've talked about the Copyright Act. We've talked about what infringement is. I can basically promise you as of this moment in time, prompting probably isn't infringement on any regard, although prompting can be based on like asking for specific artists, and that could maybe get into a weird area in the future. But essentially what we do know is that the code itself can't claim a copyright. So you'd have to go at least one level higher to the coder or coders or the company that does it when looking at an AI generating program or an art generating program composed of AI. And so what you're looking at right now is what happens whenever there's a technological innovation and the law tries to grapple with it. A lot of people have these questions. They are completely justified. In fact, I think artists are besides themselves sometimes with exactly what this is doing, because it's also, devalue is too strong a word probably. It is increasing the supply of really cool looking art, and that tends to lower the price just on a supply and demand curve kind of basis. And then when you get AI programs that are really trying to emulate specific artists and their approach to making art, well, then you can see how they feel put upon. Now, is that something that the law should have a problem with? This is a policy question. I tend to think artists need to be protected a little bit, at least, on this kind of stuff. But I also think just a flood of awesome artwork in the world is an overall good. So when you ask these questions, can companies train models without explicit permission or on public data? Public data, absolutely. It's very difficult to see how they wouldn't be able to do that. You see instances of these AI companies putting together models based on stock photos and things like that for other applications. That starts to get into more of a problem if they weren't licensed for this purpose. You might see the actual stock companies or even artists have more stringent licenses about what something can be used for that you could claim a breach on if you found it was used in a different way. But ultimately, some of this stuff is going to be the future. And in that future, we're going to have AI art. And so there are things that have to be worked around here where those rights live. And ultimately, those are going to be determined by court cases. So right now, it's a big, vague area that I can't answer for you. I really don't think anybody can answer for you. These are going to be academic papers that you'll see out there saying, this is what I think it should be. This is what it should relate to in the prior precedents for copyright and things like that. But overall, the easiest analog for AI right now is that it's a tool. It's the invention of the paintbrush. And so figuring out where that line lies, where you can infringe just based on using a tool, is going to be a very difficult thing for the law to grapple with. And it's really why the legislature gets paid the big bucks, is trying to figure this stuff out. Now, do they do it well all the time? I would argue that they do not. But these are the kinds of things that really do need to be addressed. And right this second, under the current Copyright Act, I can't promise you answers to any of these things, although I would suspect that the way that the law is written right now offers basically no protection for artists on this kind of stuff because, well, nobody anticipated this kind of question coming up when they wrote the Copyright Act. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I love the question because it does highlight an area that many people probably don't think about. We tend to think of the structures of our society as kind of concrete, fixed, and dealing with the things that we've dealt with in our lives. But as technology evolves, the law always has a problem. And so my hope would be that this would be something that is discussed in legal circles, either at the legislature or in the judiciary levels. In the relatively short term, we start getting some answers. Certainly, if there are major cases that say specific things about this, I'll cover them in virtual legality, because I think it's a very important kind of conversation to have. But I do think you're getting really awesome art results from there. I almost did a virtual legality months ago about the one piece of AI built art that won, I think, a state fair art competition or something along those lines. You might start to see categorization for things like that, competitions, be separated out into handmade and AI made for these particular pieces and contests. But I think it's fascinating. And am I back? Folks, please confirm. Appears my internet dropped out there for a minute. Want to make sure that this is still functioning, so I'm going to wait a second as we get into this. But it appears that we're back online. I have no idea what happened there. That is the wildest thing. Internet just completely dropped off. Told me that I was gone, you were gone, everybody's gone. So I apologize for that. Basically, all I was saying is I think that this is a very interesting area of the law, and it will be more interesting in the future, and we'll try to cover it in virtual legality. I don't know when you stopped hearing me. So it's one of those things where we're just going to have to work through it together. This is actually the first time I think I've dropped a live stream. So that's pretty good over 6-7 months of doing these pretty regularly. So I apologize for that. I have no idea what happened with the internet. As you know, we can't actually make that all work as we might otherwise choose to do. Robbie asks the real questions. Was I temporarily eaten by a large worm? I'm always being eaten by large beasties. It's just the way of my life. Don says, as Cornelius Fudge, he's back. All right. Well, folks, I am sincerely sorry about that. And I want to thank the individual for asking this question about AI art. I think it's one of the more important ones that intellectual property is going to have to deal with in the very near future. But it hasn't dealt with it yet. So all the lawyers can tell you is that it's very complicated. Very interesting question. Very novel, And if you're a litigator, here's my retainer. We're gonna need some money to get this through, because there's gonna be a lot of conversations about what all this means. All right, back in business. A lot of people with the super chats. Blink twice if Skynet got you. I'm robot free, I think. I do not feel robotic at this point in time, but you never know. All right, wow, cool. Always new things here on the internet and on YouTube. That is our supporter questions, the folks that do use Utreon and Patreon to ask the questions, specifically at question time. Again, sincere thanks for those supporters. Now, folks in chat, got 250 of you here in question time, which is very well attending question time, I have to say. It's fun to talk to you all. Let me know what is going on. My live chat stream has kind of stopped, so we're going to be working with that at the same time as we work with everything else. I've got a tea drink here. Thanks. Appreciate it, co-counsel. So we'll try to bring those back in play. Oh, I've connected again. Try to grab all these things. We did get a super chat from earlier. I did grab, let's say the Microsoft Activision deal goes through. Do you see regulators allowing Microsoft to buy another big publisher? I think Microsoft might wait for a more politically opportune time to do that if it goes through or it doesn't go through. It is a very interesting thing to follow. I've been speaking to a lot of outlets and a lot of places about it. And while I think it's a weak legal case, you've heard me say that in a couple of places, I'm not sure, and I can't promise whether or not the FTC won't decide to pursue it right now. So in that light, if they did, even if Microsoft won, you'd still be waiting for a regulatory environment that was a little bit cleaner if you're Microsoft, because at that point, you don't think that anybody's going to let anything interesting go through, realistically, right? So thank you for the question. I don't know. I suspect Microsoft, if they get this through, will go quiet for a considerable length of time. At least probably administrative change, if not one, then more. So this is their big shot at this point in time. I think that's how it should be seen by most people. Thank you so much for that super chat. Again, we're now in the section where we're going to be talking directly to you in the chat. Try to flag it with an @Hoeg Law or a giant capital question so that I can see these things, especially since the YouTube side of this has kind of broken. And we're working specifically with the StreamYard side of things. So I'm going to do my best there. And we're going to start here about a minute ago from folks asking questions. Here's Apex Predator question. Is it true that the FTC doesn't block deals? They approve them and sue them after. So there's a couple things in there. We've talked about it a few times. In the U.S., we don't approve deals at all. In the U.S., they're just simply allowed. It's essentially a timing kind of consideration, whether it's 30 days or 30 days after your phase 2 kind of investigation. And so they're just allowed, which means that these bodies reserve the right to sue after the fact. We see that with Facebook/Meta and the FTC bringing a complaint to potentially divest them of WhatsApp and Instagram, which are deals that were done a long time ago. And so I think that's probably what you're referring to. But overall, there are no approvals done by us. They always reserve the right to sue if they later think that this merger or this combination was anti-competitive. And we can only see it now, which, as you can imagine, isn't great for the companies. There's a certain sense of limbo for all these things. Certainly a deal like Meta buying WhatsApp and Instagram has already been integrated into their operations for years now. And so I think a reasonable person could argue it's a bit unfair to the people who want to do those transactions. I'm a bit biased on this insofar as I'm trying to get transactions done in my day job. And so I don't know that it's the greatest process. I think there should be a period of time where, the deal is done. I've purchased the asset. I've spent the money. It's very difficult to unwind these things as that combination proceeds. But they do have the right to do that. That's what they reserve the right for. All right, here's just Colin. Capitalized question. Hey, I asked for capitalized question. Colin delivered. Thank you, Colin. Thank you for the question. Hoeg Law, have you heard about the news around the Smash community and the Panda Cup and the Smash World Tour events? Yes. The wonderful part about having this job in YouTube land and running virtual legality is that if something like that happens, and basically the overall 30,000 foot notion here is that somebody got licensed, that licensed party apparently went around and started asserting control over that license and got one of the major Smash Brothers, the video game tours, kind of canceled by Nintendo. And you get emails from everybody. I got multiple emails today. I got multiple requests for comment. I got tweets and things like that. I haven't been able to address yet. I do want to read the Medium post that the Smash World Tour folks put up there a little bit more completely. I skimmed through it all early this morning, but I have seen it. It is the kind of thing I would do a virtual legality on. I might be too busy today to do a separate virtual legality, but it is on the list, and it's interesting, certainly, and I might cover it. Ken Silva, Nintendo issued a cease and desist to one of the biggest community organizers, flipping the entire community on its head. We'd be able to do some coverage of the story. That's the same story that we were just talking about. I don't know if it was formally a cease and desist. It sounded like a cease and desist request from the Medium post, but I'll have to read it more fulsomely. At this point, I don't know whether I'll be doing a virtual legality about it, but it's certainly the kind of thing I would like to do. It just might not work within the schedule for today. We will see. We need Rick to say fulsome now. I already handled that, Shireen. Thank you. Hoeg Law, have you considered adding new tiers to the YouTube? If people subscribe on Patreon, I don't think they get emotes. If people want the emotes, I don't think I can get you emotes on the Patreon. So the emotes are a tool or a technological function of YouTube. I'd love to just give you the emotes if you subscribe wherever you want. I'll look into it. I don't think I can. So thank you for asking the question, Don. All of this is always new. We don't have a team of 30 here at the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. It's just me and co-counsel. So we try to address these things, and I'm certainly looking to do a potential tier revamp overall, probably next year. Maybe with, Lawyers and Dragon stuff, maybe with other things. I don't know. The one rule I've always had on this channel, and that rule won't stop, is that if I'm talking about items of substance from a legal perspective, that this is a channel that is hopefully entertaining, but also supposed to be educational and informative, I won't put any of that stuff behind a paywall. So kind of some of the normal stuff that you do on tiers and memberships and things like that, I won't do. But for emotes, I would love to get them over to the other platforms. I just don't know whether that works or not. So if you do know that works in some way, or another YouTuber that you follow has had that work out, text me, DM me, let me know, and I will see what I can do on that, because I'd be happy to. I would be happy to. I just didn't think it was a technical function. Jason says the joy of having multiple platforms for support. I'm a supporter on Utreon. Yeah, well, that's part of the fun, right? Utreon's a smaller company, and Utreon's been supporting the channel for a long time, at least as far back as the COPPA stuff. So that's like in the early hundreds of episodes of virtual legality, and they've been working on having platform parity and doing some other stuff against Patreon, and I like to support that. I love to support entrepreneurs. So that's why we have the multiple platform approach, even though people are more familiar with Patreon. But it does mean trying to remember to hit all of the different platforms, and then what can they do for you, especially when you're trying to hold to some kind of ethos like I am, which is we're not going to hide stuff behind payments, not informational stuff, not stuff that is related directly to the law. So, if this gets transferred over to a community stream, which is something that I've been thinking about, because otherwise people can ask me questions during Hangouts and Headlines, then, that might be the kind of thing that I would paywall, but I really don't even like that. So it's a tricky thing to figure out, because I love y'all and I don't want to just block things behind paywall, but I also do want to, have support for the channel and make it make sense for the amount of time and resources we're putting into it and the amount of things I'm asking co-counsel to do, which is not insubstantial. So I really appreciate the support from everybody, and it is a trick. It is a trick to figure out. Colin says, question, OAH therapist notes. I think Amber heard. Might they have been admitted as contemporaneous notes in the evidentiary sense? What's the window for contemporaneousness in such a context? Does a diary work? Yeah, a diary works. The notion is that there is more truth value to note-taking that is not made in the context of litigation, that you're taking it for some other reason. In the context of therapist notes, it's for medical evaluation and hopefully help. A diary would be to keep track of your thoughts, and a journal of what's happening in your life at the moment in time. Obviously, some of those work better. There's other reasons to discount things like personal diaries because you can write whatever you want in there. And there are ostensibly medical ethics reasons why you don't write whatever you want in your therapist notes, that kind of thing. But yes, contemporaneousness, which you heard asked about in the trial a bunch of times, is often useful to establishing some kind of evidentiary value because you know, or at least you think you know, that it wasn't written solely for the purpose of being presented in court on a later date. So yes, basically anything works for that. It doesn't mean that it is trustworthy evidence. There's other things that you would be evaluating on. Definitely. Got questions for Mrs. Hoeg Law. Natalie O asks, media questions. I love media questions. Did you watch Wednesday? I could make a joke here about what on Wednesday? No, I watched the first half of the first episode of Wednesday, I think before Hangouts and Headlines, and seemed interesting. I don't know whether I'll follow up on it. I actually don't really love Tim Burton. I'm sorry to say. I know a lot of people really like him, but I don't really love a lot of that kind of Brady Bunch movie-esque, here's how these things would work in the real world humor. Sometimes I guess I might be in the mood for that, but very often I'm not. So I didn't love it at the start, and we'll see. I'll probably follow up on it because I have Netflix. But it was not something that immediately captivated me. Did you like it, Natalie? I know a lot of people have said good things about it, and I'll probably follow up with it. But I've been watching other stuff when I get the chance, and it hasn't been a lot of chances to watch those new things. Jack, are you watching the World Cup, and what do you think of Qatar being allowed to host the tournament? So I have an episode of Hangouts and Headlines that talks about some of the controversies with respect to Qatar or Qatar. My comments don't like it anyway. I pronounce the country name, so I apologize. And I am watching the World Cup because I love the World Cup. But I feel guilty watching the World Cup. It's a bad thing. You have this now with like the most recent Olympics and World Cups. You feel guilty about it. I don't think, probably based on all the stories that came out, the country should have gotten a chance to host. And I do think FIFA is a pretty corrupt organization. So I try to focus solely on the pitch. As my colleagues or commenters across the sea might say. But I feel bad about doing it the whole time. It's very conflicted watching this particular World Cup. But yes, I was watching yesterday when the U.S. advanced to the knockout stages. We're playing the Netherlands on Saturday. I know there are folks that watch the channel from the Netherlands. And so we'll see how that goes. But yes, I am watching it. No, I don't think they should have been awarded the World Cup event. So there you go. Bingo. I think that's probably for fulsomely. Fulsomely. Does it count for more bingo squares? I don't know. Don says, Hoeg, that was my point. If you add a 99-cent tier like Kurt at Uncivil Law, it's not such a big commitment. You only have the $5 YouTube tier now. Oh, I see. Just an emoji tier. Oh, maybe. Let me think about it. The YouTube stuff was always just kind of having a tier that allowed people that particularly follow the live streams to support the channel. And I don't want to have, it messed up across the various platforms. So if you actually go look at Utreon and Patreon and the YouTube, even the YouTube tier that we have matches up entirely with what those other platforms tiers would be, except that you get emojis because I can't give you emojis on the other platforms. And so I know it sounds like equivocating. I want to make sure I don't screw up any of I don't want anybody to feel like they're being treated unfairly is the realistic answer to that. So I will look at it. I can't make promises in this context because I just haven't thought about it through. But it might be something that works. So let me see. Yeah. And so that's a good question. Parallax Abstraction says, Hoeg, how did you like Andor now that the season's done? So my parents go on vacation, go visit siblings during the Thanksgiving holiday. And we had been watching, me and my eldest, the Andor series with my parents. And they basically asked us to stop watching when they left. So we're still 3 episodes out from the ending. I've heard great things. I love Andor. And so I think it's my favorite piece of Star Wars content from Disney. And I have great hopes for the last few episodes of Andor, but haven't watched them. Parallax says, I have to say it was a breath of fresh air for Star Wars for me, and I'm very glad to see a second season is coming. Yeah, I think they approved it before they even aired the first episodes of Andor season 1. Yeah, I am still very arm's length with Disney and their understanding of Star Wars. But at least for the Andor team, I think they're delivering exactly what I want out of a Star Wars product. And so I'm super thrilled to see it. It's so nice. People get on my case for being too negative. And I say, well, there's just a lot of stuff to be negative about. It's a lot of media that's crap. And I am so happy to be able to look at something like that and just say, yeah, absolutely, go watch that. It is fantastic. And that feels good to be able to say. I like liking things, folks. I really do. So, yes, thank you, Parallax. I love Andor. What else we got here? People talking about the tier questions, totally warranted. Lindsay says, I just finished Wednesday about 20 minutes ago, predicted the twist very early, but still enjoyed it. Cool. Cool. I will watch more. Shireen says, USA through to the knockout rounds. Congrats, USA. Hey, if you can make 2 goals in 3 games work for you, then more power to them. Note to self, Hoeg would not like the Dark Shadows movie from Tim Burton. Trying to think of what my favorite Tim Burton movie is. It's probably the original Batman. And then something weird like Big Fish. Like, I don't like oddity for the sake of oddity. Like Edward Scissorhands never worked for me. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is god-awful. He's got his own style. I think that's great. We need more directors with style and fewer making just kind of large-scale sitcom type movies. But it's just not my style. Just not my style. B, Hoeg Law, I'm 3 episodes in and can recommend giving it another go. Also not a massive Tim Burton fan, but enjoying it so far. Like emoji. Yeah, this is not I'm never going to watch that again. I thought the first, whatever I watched, 25 minutes, 30 minutes of it were compelling enough to continue. It's just finding the time. And certainly when you're streaming every morning, every day, and when you're also doing the law stuff and everything in between, it is difficult to find that time. We just finished God of War Ragnarok in Hoeg House last night. That's what we spent our time on. And I'm glad to have that behind me. I'm not going to lie. It outstayed its welcome somewhat. And so I'm glad I'm done with that. But that was what I was trying to finish up. Next. Oh, speaking of, I'm psychic here. Don, please share your in-depth God of War Ragnarok thoughts. So I put up a final review on Twitter yesterday. And I'm not going to do a long-form God of War Ragnarok thing for especially the people that haven't played it yet. It is one of the highest-rated games of the year. It's one of the highest-rated games of all time for video games. And I will say I think it is massively overrated. It's about a 7 out of 10 for me. I think it's a very pretty game. I think they've improved combat from the original God of War in 2018, not the original God of War. And I think they had no idea what story they wanted to tell. And so we got every story they wanted to tell. A number of them don't go together very well, and a number of them outstay their welcome by a matter of hours. A good idea for a 90-minute sequence is now a 4-hour sequence. And it circles on itself for 35 or 40 hours of gameplay in terms of narrative. I'm a narrative guy, right? I can hack at things in any number of games. So I'm glad your combat is good, God of War, but I want to know exactly what you're doing with your story. And the answer is nothing. And honestly, the ending is anticlimactic. And so we were expecting really big things, big fireworks, lots of big stuff at the ending, and it just didn't happen. So it's a fine game. I don't regret playing it exactly. I wanted it to be done sometime when it was at its halfway mark, and I thought it was finishing up. But as much as I wish I liked it more, I got to be honest, I didn't like it a ton. And that is a real shame. It's a real shame. I think Horizon is by far the better Sony first-party title this year. And it doesn't have remotely the same kind of scores. And so that's a different story. Maybe I'll do a virtual legality extra or something. I was like, let's talk about how critics arrive at a 10 for this game. Because it is wild. Not just a critic, by the way. Oodles of them. And so I am constantly kind of thinking about that, right? I do hangouts and headlines. I'm constantly thinking about media approaches to stories. And part of that is reviewing things. How do we arrive at a world in which virtually everyone agrees that this is a masterpiece? When I'm not saying I'm in the majority. I don't need to be in the majority. There should be voices that are reflective of what I'm saying to you, even in the minority. And I don't think those really appear so much in the video game review zeitgeist. And I'd love to talk more about that. Maybe on the Bitcast this weekend. Maybe on the Bitcast. But thank you. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to do like an hour long. I might do a post-mortem on God of War Ragnarok. Don't know if anybody's interested in that. But yeah. Aaron says, hey, Hoeg, I usually watch the World Cup, but I can't bring myself to watch it this time. I hear you. I feel bad literally like every time. So I hear you. If you make that decision, more power to you. I respect it. I do. This Sarah says, Hup Holland Hup. Thought they weren't called Holland anymore. I'm trying to be respectful. I don't know. Was there a problem with Holland? I don't actually know like the political or other issues with how he came to the Netherlands. I don't know that. Maybe I should ask some people from there. Question, do you think your family will transition to the dark side vacationing at Universal Studios once Nintendo Land opens? We like Universal Studios. The main problem we have with Universal is my family's not really a thrill family. And Universal Studios is primarily roller coasters and aggressive motion simulators. And so that isn't as enjoyable for the Hoeg family that likes a nice dark ride or likes a, whatever Epcot used to be, a scientific edutainment lesson. So yeah, we'll definitely go to Universal. My family loves Harry Potter. We'll definitely check out Nintendo Land. But it probably wouldn't be the only thing we checked out in Orlando. Parallax Abstraction just got paid. So finally able to order my Reasonable Minds Can Differ shirt. Yes, thank you. I told my girlfriend you had those and she was like, you need to get one. Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's some of our more popular stuff. I truly believe it. And we got, stickers and fun things that say Reasonable Minds Can Differ in the store. So I really, really appreciate it. Hoeg EDB has a $2.99 tier for YouTube emojis. Okay, fantastic. But Emily, so here's the situation, right? Emily also doesn't have all the platforms running, and Emily also doesn't have. Emily also has a members only stream tier kind of thing that I don't know. I don't know whether that would be a good thing for this channel or not. You can talk to me about it in the comments or chat if you want. Again, I'm really reluctant to paywall anything. That's why you see the way that my structure is built. So we'll see. We will see. EDB has a tier like that. Yes. See, y'all know how to talk to me. Emily makes such good choices with the way she does these things. Aaron says Andor's ending was amazing. I love to hear it, but I don't want my hype too high. So I'm just going to say Andor's ending is worthwhile because if I get my hype too high, then there's only disappointment below that hype level. So I appreciate it, Aaron. I'm looking forward to watching Andor with my parents when they come back to town. So we'll enjoy that. Excuse me. I wondered why Papa Hoeg said he was in Florida, because he was. All right. Natalie says, Jenna/Wednesday is my child's evil twin. I'm partial. Looks a lot alike. It's good. Good. I thought she was doing well for what I saw of like I said, the first half hour of the show. So I don't hate it. It's just a matter of finding time. Question, favorite shoes streaming right now? I don't know, probably an Air Jordan of some kind. No, my favorite show that's streaming right now is Andor. I absolutely. Unless you think that after the finale, it can't be Andor, which is fair. If we're going to be really technical, it's a legal channel. We can do that here. But it's Andor without a doubt. And then I don't know what's streaming right now. So I'll just also say that I really liked House of the Dragon. I thought it was a strong streaming fall. Rings of Power was a letdown. If David's in the chat, he'll hear that. It's like a clarion call. Rings of Power was a letdown, but House of the Dragon was not. Surprisingly good. And then Andor is amazing. Amazing. Oh, we're talking best Tim Burton movies. Big Fish is one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites too. Nightmare Before Christmas. A lot of people like that one. Never liked it as much as some. Ed Wood is his best. I saw that a long time ago. I honestly don't remember how that goes as a movie so much. Not going to lie, I was not a fan of his version of Miss Peregrine. Sad because I know the author was thrilled about getting him as a director. Yeah, I thought that movie was okay. I don't think it matches up with the book so much, but yeah, I only know that from my daughter who reads the books. Kimberly, I've not liked Disney's version of Star Wars. Can't get past the fact that they ignored all the books between episode 6 and Disney's first offering. And the books since got their series are just, I'm going to assume that it says bad, poor, or otherwise. What else do we have? Lots of fun from these questions. I like that we're on Andor. I'll be watching Willow when hubby gets home from work. Can't wait, and I so hope it's good. What's so funny to me about this, I actually was DMing with somebody last night about this, is that the marketing for Willow is ready for a new adventure, and it's like, it's fine, except that it's like, in my head, every time they say it, because it's all over Twitter, it's all over social media, every time they say it, it's like, yes, come enjoy this new adventure of a TV series based on a kind of cult classic movie from 1988. That's new. It's just very Disney. It's very on brand for Disney. Don asks, last super chat, The Last of Us Part 2 or God of War Ragnarok or Gotham Knights? You're just trying to get me in trouble. I actually think Last of Us Part 2 and God of War Ragnarok have some of the same problems, which is a lot of meandering pacing and a certain amount of back padding, self-aggrandizement on what are fairly superficial concepts that are treated like revelations from above. And that both Last of Us Part 2 and Ragnarok do that. And I think that's part of why I dislike them so much on a narrative level, is that there's a certain amount of sanctimony, and aren't we sharing the truth of reality with you, which I can accept if you've got a really conceptually interesting thought. When you take something like vengeance is bad and you make that a 40-hour game, and then you have characters that like know that and should know that and react differently, and you have to move your pieces in a way that helps you make your point in a way that's artificial feeling, that's a big problem. And God of War has that problem as well. So, man, that's difficult. I guess I would say, Last of Us Part 2 has a bit more going for it than Ragnarok. I can't believe you made me say that sentence, Don. As Ragnarok or Gotham Knights, had more fun playing Gotham Knights. Certainly not remotely a technological equivalent. And Gotham Knights is just silly, but it's also not preaching to you. It's not trying to pretend like it's really important. And so I think I've had more fun playing Gotham Knights. Man, somebody's going to clip those. You're going to get me in trouble, Don. You're going to get me in trouble. Prototopic says Ragnarok for Game of the Year. Have you played it, David? I have questions about this. Maybe I'll have you on. Maybe we'll do a postmortem. If you have played it, I'll have you on. You can be the loyal opposition here. David, using super chats. You getting Callisto Protocol on Friday? Yep. Also Midnight Suns, and I'm getting Front Mission. It's a big week for things that I like. I'm hopeful Callisto Protocol is good. Midnight Suns is a card game made by the creator of XCOM, so I was never not getting that, even though I wish it weren't Marvel. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but I'm definitely getting that, and we'll see. Oh, Statistical Bet has an answer. Holland is a region of the Netherlands. It would be akin to calling the USA Texas. Thank you, Statistical Bet. I appreciate that. There are some Texans that would love to call the USA Texas, I think. But fantastic. I want to get the names right. In my head, I think Netherlands is Holland. So I appreciate that. Co-counsel making the definitive statements. Oh, we're going to Nintendo Land. K Leader? Hoeg Law, West Coast, so I'm never online when you stream. Got to get my questions in. Fantastic. So you've said in other videos, Littlest Hoeg likes merging animals and food. Does the Hoeg clan have feelings about bug snacks? We played bug snacks when it was first coming out. And I think the Littlest Hoegling played it a lot and then kind of fell off of it. I don't know whether that's the game design or not. I really wasn't. I was sitting there. I was playing with her, but I wasn't playing the game. But it did seem a little bit, I don't know, finicky, puzzly. Not what was engaging enough in that particular context. So I think it's a fine game. But I think she also likes him a little cuter and doesn't like capturing them. So yeah, Bug Snacks certainly does that combination that Littlest Hoegling likes so much. Hoeg with the eShop for the Wii U, 3DS shutting down in 2023. Why can't the big three give the server blades for their older platforms to gamers and make those games free? I would argue that that's primarily because you see games and publishers have massive success with re-releases 10 years down the line, and they don't want to give up that asset for free. I know that's not a great answer for people that want to play games. And certainly there's a bunch of stuff that I would love to have kind of unsealed from the vault of technological sadness. But I think that's probably why you don't see it more often. You see games that I think are like massive successes, like Tactics Ogre Reborn, which I am loving, might be my favorite game of the month. But it is, it's Tactics Ogre. It's a game that is, what is it, like 30 years old? I'm so old. So I think that they like to reserve those things because they never know when they'd be giving up an asset. All right, it is 10:56. We're going to do about 5 more minutes of questions. I'm already 10 minutes behind on those. So we're going to try to do rapid fire answers here, folks. So Jacob asks, how are you feeling about the auto electric self-driving Honda car with a PS5 built, releasing to compete with Tesla in 2025? Me, I don't trust it. A lawsuit if it crashes. Well, a lawsuit if it crashes is happening anyway. That's what lawyers do. I don't know whether you could trust it or not. I assume it's not in the driver's seat, right? I haven't checked up on this. But if it's not, there's a lot of things that have video games in the back at this point, whether they're vans or otherwise. So I think it's interesting. Certainly an interesting competitive move. Hoeg, movie reviews are far more tilted than video game reviews. Are they? Problem is development investment necessitates a return justifying any slant/grift in marketing. I often feel, Colin, that movie reviews have a greater variance in looking at these movies, especially blockbusters. And I'm not saying that we need to get into the only artisanal cheeses are good enough for me version of criticism that I think sometimes infects movies. But I do think the fact that you spent $200 million on your movie doesn't get you good scores the same way that might in the video game landscape. I think video game critics are still very susceptible to polish. And God of War Ragnarok is polished, but I just don't think that makes it. I just don't think that makes it itself good. So that becomes an issue. Question: can Microsoft buy IPs from Activision for $69 billion, then buy the studios piecemeal for $300 million a piece and skip the regulatory review? No. Regulators will look through a series of transactions. So it's actually a transaction or series of transactions that can result in a combination that they can look at. And basically all those pieces are still over the threshold for reviewing them independently. So basically, no, they can't do that. However, they could have an exclusive license to something like Call of Duty sold to them as part of this. They just can't rebuild the deal that was otherwise scuttled. If it does get blocked, then they can't kind of try to play with technicalities on that. But they could have other arrangements that would be allowed. Rick, critics said from the start to not get their hype too high. Re-Andor in the first place, good, not great. But the finale said, they all said, let the hype fly. You can't. I refuse to be hyped up too much for the series that I'm already loving the most this year because I just don't want to. I don't want to get into that section. Let's see here. Andor was very good overall. Thank you for advising on watching in 3-episode chunks. That is the way. Here's David responding to me, actually saying Rings of Power. Didn't even know he was in the chat before then. Rings of Power, says David. It's his favorite. I'm gonna. You know what we're gonna do? We're going to see if we can't get Postmortems, David Prototopics, Rings of Power, Season 2 as a special series, which I feel okay committing to right now because that's future Rick's problem in 3 years whenever they get done making this. And I think we would just have a blast. So we'll see if we can get David over here for one of those and see what he has to say about good old Season 2 of The Lord of the Rings, one of the best pieces of literature, most evocative in the Western canon. And thank God Amazon is just expanding on those thoughts and making just a killer TV show. Right, David? Shireen Willow has just started dreaming on Disney Plus. Was that today? All right. Fantastic. I'll check it out. I honestly don't remember having a ton of love for Willow when I saw it originally, so we'll see. We can't trust a guy who likes Gotham Knights as much as you. It's a 7. I don't know what to tell you. Love you, Hogan teasing, but I despise Gotham Knights. It is like the 70th 7 ever, except for Evil West, which is clearly the king of 7s, and I adore Evil West. So if you're going to play a game this fall, if you're going to play a game that released in the last month, play Evil West. I highly recommend it. Question, what are you doing about the significant lack of entertainment for the viewers on Saturday morning now that L&D is over? What are you doing about this? Well, I will be pre-gaming both the U.S. World Cup match and the Big Ten Championship. Go Blue. So that's my Saturday. You can DM with me if you want on those, and I'll probably be happy to talk sports with y'all. But we're going to take December off. We're going to have holidays, which is already a scheduling nightmare. And then we'll be back. Don't worry about it. We will be back. But as of right now, I am not waking up in the morning on Saturdays to stream with you for a month. That's it. I'm only saying a month right now, and we'll go from there because I was streaming every day. And so we'll be doing a little bit of a break. We will be back. We love Lawyers and Dragons. Ton of fun. Everybody loves it that participates in it. I can't promise you all in the listening audience love it. But we will be back. Has anyone asked you if your chances of an ABK deal going through has changed from 65-35? Almost every day. Still 65-35. I still think that the most likely result of all this is that they are brought to the table for concessions, and that those concessions are something that Microsoft can live with, and that don't material change the deal too much. Music analysis. Has anyone noticed how the music of Andor was dissonant and slightly despondent, similar to Rogue One? Also, music distinctly similar to HBO's series Chernobyl. I think the Andor music has been fantastic with one misstep, like one very specific prompt misstep. So figure out what I'm even meaning there if you're psychic. But I think the Andor music is deliberately designed to be kind of here at the end of all things-y. And so I really like that. I also really like some of the like in-universe Star Wars music that they've come up with. Sometimes that sounds really wrong when other mediums try to do it. But I think they really nailed it with Andor. And let's see here. Kevin, Hoeg Law, video game reviewers like pretty and don't seem to care enough about fun. Stopped reading them a decade ago for that reason. Then again, I don't watch movie reviews either. Yeah, I don't mean to say that I just read reviews and like I base my opinion on these things. I don't. And also I don't do the opposite. I'm not that contrarian, I don't think. Co-counsel might have a different opinion on that. But it's just remarkable to see something that I think has as many obvious flaws as God of War Ragnarok does really not get discussed in large corners of what is a very important metric, important kind of video game sales moving industry. And I would see it do better. And it's difficult because you get comments in Twitter or you get comments even when I say something like this on YouTube that are like, well, who are you? You're just a guy. And I totally agree with that. This is just my subjective opinion of these things, but I do think that a functioning review class on this stuff would be largely reflective of the variance of experience that you could have with a product, whether that's a movie, a TV show, or a video game. And I don't see that with video games. I really just don't see that kind of criticism very often, especially from the ones that can really move units when we're talking about them that way. Lucius says, I love Rings of Power. So, David, you can talk to Lucius about that. Sharon, I always followed pop culture, hence EDB, but I definitely prefer lives over recorded vids. Love chat interaction. We love it too, Sharon. Thank you for chatting with us today. And we caught up. Fantastic. So, folks, thank you so much for hanging out with me in question time. Should I say hang out? Is that a violation of my own, copyrights or intellectual property protections is the other name of the show? Lawyers, right? Thank you so much for hanging out this morning with me. Thank you for asking wonderful questions. Thank you for everybody who supports us through Utreon, Patreon, YouTube membership. I look into tiers. Honestly, the tier question has been on my mind since I started doing Hangouts and Headlines. And so I think they need a refresh. I did the tiers 2 years ago now. And so I would love to do a refresh. And the only thing that I want to make sure of is that nobody feels unfairly treated. That's super important to me. And so when I'm going to change things, question time might be changing. I want to make sure that who has ever been so wonderful to support the channel and otherwise support what we do here doesn't feel shortchanged. So I want to give more while still making some shifts into where I think the best value is and what I can do is. So that's why you see me slow on this stuff. It's the risk aversity of a lawyer, but I want to make sure that nobody feels unfairly treated because you guys are the best, and I really, really appreciate it. Gun to my head, don't like this question. Xbox or PlayStation? PlayStation. I know you're going to get into the comments. People are going to tell you I'm owned by Microsoft. Phil Spencer's on my speed dial, whatever it might be. It's PlayStation. I don't know what to tell you. That's my true and honest answer, SAJ4 Omega. And I think that's a wonderful place to end the show. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. I don't think I'll be doing a virtual legality today, but if I do, you can check out the channel for it. And I will see you later on, either at Hangouts and Headlines, virtual legality, or elsewise. Talk to you soon, everybody.